over the last decade, you could be a poser in this industry and get a license. Like
Right.
every real estate agent went through the exact same number of hours to get a real estate license because they memorized the same number of terms. But the way they show up to really serve the consumer is significantly different.
This is The Real Deal, where real estate meets real life. Whether you're a seasoned real estate expert, a first-time home buyer, or if you're simply passionate about hearing small business stories, this is the podcast for you. Join us as we dive deep into the world of real estate and beyond.
All right. Well, welcome to episode 33 of The Real Deal. I am your host, Janine Igliani, with my co-host, Ryan Hatcher.
What up?
And our guest today is a longtime friend, but also a colleague and someone that I super respect. Marcus, thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This'll
Mr.
be
Green.
awesome.
Do I do the salute like you did?
You can. Yes.
Is that your signature?
I don't know.
It kind of is, right?
I
think
guess.
it is.
I guess.
So one of the things that we love to start with, Marcus, is just like a blanket, tell us about yourself. And we really want to know like the nitty gritty. Who is Marcus?
Ooh,
Where'd you come from?
Good question. So more background or like what I
Yeah.
stand for?
Like I want to
All
know
of it.
like where'd you grow up
of it?
and all of that.
Okay, awesome. So I grew up in a little town in Utah, Centerville, Utah. Back then it was a little farming town. So dirt roads to the house. My dad was a construction worker. 5 boys, 1 girl in the family. So
What number are you?
I'm number 4.
Okay.
So it goes boy, girl, and then the rest of us are boys. So it was like all fist fights, GI Joes,
Yep.
all the things, right? Like last day of school, mom cuts the jeans into shorts, and it was like,
love
yeah.
it.
So it was a really great growing up. And then went to high school in Utah. Then I went and served a mission for my church.
Where'd you go?
I went to Brazil.
Okay.
So a couple years in Brazil, and that was
They speak Portuguese there.
Portuguese.
So do you
yeah,
speak Portuguese?
I do. I speak
Yeah.
Portuguese.
Did you learn it there or learn it before you went?
Learned it there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd learned some words before, but then have either of you learned a different language?
Spanish.
Oh, you did?
The Dominican Republic.
Okay. So
I'm
it might have been the
basically
same for you.
fluent in Spanish,
So I go, you show up there thinking you know some words, then you realize very quickly, like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
crud.
Especially,
I don't speak anything.
Yeah, especially there, they speak so fast.
Well,
Yeah.
don't they kind of like there's different
Yes.
slang, right?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like you learn like really proper Portuguese, and then they
Yeah.
put you in the slums, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, this
Okay,
is.
so hold on. I have to ask, super random, but is there a lot of like street jujitsu? Because I've heard that's a thing.
So there is a lot of jujitsu and like, but they do like capoeira and
Yeah.
a lot of different martial arts stuff down there, which is fun, which I love martial arts.
Is that how
Yeah.
you got into it?
Yeah.
So I started jujitsu and kickboxing. Both my kickboxing coach and my jujitsu coach are Brazilian. So that's how I keep up on my Portuguese.
That's
Cool.
cool.
I was working with them. But when I was in Brazil on my mission, I actually did capoeira down there, which
Okay.
is like another martial arts down there, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So went on my mission. That was a really great experience for me because it opened my eyes to like just looking at the world through a different set of eyes. Like even though I grew up in a house that we didn't have a lot of money and things, compared to the rest of the world, are just so far ahead. And it was just some of the most eye-opening experiences I had were sitting on a dirt floor of someone's houses and just them finding so much happiness just like changed my perspective on things. So that was like
That's
one of the
cool.
coolest learning experiences I ever
Yeah.
had. I came home, I got a business finance degree and knew that I wanted to get into real estate. So at 21 years old, got my real estate license.
How did you know that you wanted to get into real estate at 21?
So when I was 14, I went and visited my uncle actually in Arizona. I lived in Utah. We came down here, visited my uncle, and he drove a brand new Porsche, which was like, for a 14-year-old kid, was
So
like, that's
cool.
awesome. So he actually woke me up early one morning and was like, let's go for a ride. Actually let me drive his Porsche here in Gilbert when
That's
it was
awesome.
it was all cotton fields down here. And he said like, man, you got to lay into this thing. Let me drive his car super fast. And at the end of the ride, I was like, what do you do for a living? And he said he was in real estate. So I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
But that's what I want to
But that's what I want to do, which is a stupid reason to want to get into
cool.
real estate. But I knew
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to do.
That's cool.
Okay, so 21. So what did you do? You said you wanted to get into real estate. What did that look like?
Yeah. So got my real estate license and then found out very quickly that to be a real estate investor, you need money. And I had no money. So I knew I wanted to learn from the best. And so I heard about a guy named Tom Calder in Park City, Utah. And I called Tom out of the blue. He had no idea who I was. And I said, hey, I've heard about you. I would love to come interview you. He was gracious enough to give me some of his time. And at the end of my conversation with him, I just said, I want to come work for you. Whatever you offer me, I want to come. And he offered me $21,000 a year to come be his assistant, which was, I mean, nowadays it's nothing. Even back then it was not a lot of money. I think he made me that offer thinking I would be like, no way. But I said, great, as long as you teach me, I'll come do it.
Wow. There's so many lessons, by the way, in all of what you just said, and the power of like learning from someone who's gone before you. Yeah. Right. Seeing the value in more than just the dollar, right? Yeah. But just what am I learning? And that's so valuable.
Yeah. And there are things about him that just were so intriguing to me. Like
what?
You don't walk into his office and be like, oh, this guy just emanates success. But just the way he made me feel coming in of like, oh, he instantly cares about me. The way other people talked about him in the industry was just like, oh, we all love Tom. We love being around Tom. We love doing deals with Tom. And then the other thing I really loved is he was a very active real estate investor looking for deals on his own all the time. And then as a solo agent was a top producer in Park City, which Park City is a luxury market, high-end properties, and just did a phenomenal job. So I was just really intrigued with that. The cool thing is he had some very strict rules that I had to follow to be on his team, one of which changed my life, which was every month I had to present to him my net worth statement. And as a 21-year-old kid, like I had no money. So it was like not a fun exercise to put together your net worth statement. But that was one of the things that was really important to him, was for me to track my money, like every commission that came in, what am I doing with it? How am I building my family? Those type of things, which was a big lesson.
What a great lesson to learn at 21.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is fun now because I've got a graph of my personal net worth every month since I was 21 to now I'm 43. So.
Yeah. And that's one thing I know that you've done with your daughters, which I love and I want to talk more about too. But so anyways, keep going. So you did that.
So
what's next?
Got my license then.
Wait, didn't you promise to double his business or something? Or was there some agreement?
Wasn't that I promised to double his business, but we did double his business that first year, about a year and a half.
What did you do? How did you do that?
So it was so interesting that he had been so successful purely off of just like his hustle, grind, charisma. But on the back end, things were just a mess, right? There was no like system or organization to it. And so just by me organizing his database, leaning into that piece of it, helping get some clarity around some marketing ideas and getting like streamlining his message beyond just being likable. It was, I don't want to take away from like the power of his business was him. Like it was who he was, how he was showing up, his reputation, but just, I think creating some systems behind it, some organization, it allowed him to impact more people and connect with more people. But yeah, we doubled his business and had a great year. And finally, he started paying me pretty dang good. It was for a 21-year-old kid. About my second year with him is the first time I made over $100,000 a year. Which was awesome.
What was your role?
So I started just as an assistant, and then what thing I really loved about him too is I in no way merited or deserved the introduction of partner, but very quickly he started introducing to people as his partner, which just like. Now that I look back at it I looked like I was 12. I'm sure other people like giggled like, that's nice of you, but it made me stand taller, right? It's like, it spoke greatness into me at that time, which is pretty cool.
Someone to believe in you.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
I'm sure that helped you rise to that too.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Yeah. And Tom and I are still friends to this day.
So he's still around?
So he actually moved to Prescott. So he spends half his time in Prescott, half his time in Park City. But I still text him every once in a while and say like, hey, thinking about you, or hey, I texted him actually, he was so nice. I texted him the other day. I'm like, hey, I have a feeling there's a bunch more wisdom I need to get from you. And he said something back to me along the lines of like, hey, I think there's a lot I need to learn from you still too, which is so cool. Cause like, he's just was a really big impact to my career.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what after that?
So I worked with Tom for 2 years, and this is probably looking back. It's so funny looking back at your career because you recognize mistakes you made or wrong turns you made. And at the time, nobody was really building real estate teams, right? It was you became a really good agent. Maybe you had an assistant, maybe one more agent, like a showing agent, buyer's agent, but there really wasn't a team thing. And so I still knew that I wanted to be a real estate investor. I had bought my first couple investment properties at the time. And then, so at that time I had made enough money to go launch my first investment company. And so at that time I shut down my real estate business with him, got someone trained to take my place, and then shifted and went and launched Iron Horse Investments and got involved with a construction company called Green Construction, where we started buying big tracts of ground, developing them, and then our construction company would do the infrastructure work, and then we were selling lots off to home builders. And so that was like the first shift to where I went from transactional real estate, not just doing my own investment, to now like really focusing on how do I create product to work directly with investors and invest and develop. So did that until about 2005, 2000. So that we did that probably until 2007, 2008, and saw the writing on the wall of what was going to happen. At that point, a lot of developers lost their shirts. Luckily, we saw it, and I started liquidating our assets before things got too crazy. I only got stuck with one project. It was the only real estate project I've ever lost money on, was that last project. This was another huge lesson I learned in my career.
You said, right? Yeah.
So I had to go into the bank, and basically it was the last project I was with. And I said, all right, so the writing's on the wall. This is not looking good. What would it take for you to take this project back? And he told me, and he was funny because I was still a young kid, right? I was only 20. At that time I was 26 maybe. And he said to me like, man, you'd have to write me a check for like $100,000 for me to take this back. I got a checkbook out, wrote him a check for $100,000 and gave it back to him. Wow. And he was surprised that we had the ability to do that, but it was like one of those, it was a hard check to write at the time, because it was just like, but it was the right move to be like, I just need a clean slate. And to move on. We had done really well on other projects, and it was actually good timing because the market continued to take, that it would have cost me a lot more money to get out of that project. And that at that point, it gave me a lot of freedom, because then I could look at where the next opportunity was. So that's when I started studying different markets. I looked at Southern California, Vegas, Phoenix, Detroit, and Florida were the markets I identified that had the biggest downturn in the market, and just started to go to work on understanding the economics of each one of those markets. Fell in love with Phoenix. That's when I just started selling. I already sold all the real assets that I wanted to sell, but at that point I just got so committed to the Arizona market that I sold everything I owned, down to like my horses, my guns, anything anyone would buy, pay me $1 for. I started selling stuff. People thought I was crazy. And then that's when I came to Arizona and started buying houses down here as fast as I could.
Before you go on, personally, what was your life like? Had you met your wife yet?
Yeah. So I actually met my wife when I was 22. So I was 22 when I got married. She was 19 when we got engaged. She had just, I tell my kids, particularly because I have a 19-year-old now, I'm like, look at my 19-year-old. I'm like, there's no way that you were old enough to get married. But for some reason we thought we were. Yeah. So we got married super young, which is probably the greatest blessing of my life, to think like how we looking back at it now, we thought we were adults when we got married, but we really grew up together, right? Mm-hmm. We've been together longer than we've been apart now, which is really cool. So we got married super young, had our first daughter at, I was 24 when we had Abby. And then we just kept having kids. We have 4 daughters.
4 girls.
Yeah. All girls at my house, which is crazy.
Awesome. So catch us back up now. Sorry, we had to take that because I wanted to know. I love the side-by-side story, right? Professional, personal. So then what happened? So we're 08, 09.
Yep. So that's when I started. It started at first. Chriselle had no anticipation to move to Arizona. So on Sunday nights, I would hop in my truck and I'd drive to Arizona, and I would chase property all week. Friday nights, I'd drive back to Utah, spend 2 days with family. And then Sunday night, I'd hop back in my car and come back down here. Wow. And pretty quickly, she saw that like the success I was having and how committed I was to it. She's like, okay, this isn't working. Mm-hmm. I'll come. Let's go to Arizona. Yeah. And so
you landed in Power Ranch.
I landed in Power Ranch. That's where I met you.
Yep.
Which is funny because when we came down, she's like, I'll give you 2 years max in Arizona, then we're going to come home. But we lived down here 6.5 years, loved it down here, still love it down here. In fact, she gets mad at me every time I get on a plane to come down here for work. She's like, do I get to come this time? I'm like, let's go. Yeah.
So time out. So this is kind of cool for me to have both of you here together, because she has been extremely instrumental in my career, but you were the one that started it. So we met at church actually. Yeah. And for some reason I was like, you know what? He seems like he knows what he's doing. And I didn't know what you did. So I just said,
that's pretty good if you're like, he knows what he's doing, but I've got no clue
yeah,
what he does.
So here's the funny thing. So I went and met with him, and I said, what do you do? And then you go, what do you think I do?
I did.
And I said, well, I know you have a property management company. That's all
funny.
I knew. Little did I know that there were 7 other businesses in the making at the time.
Yeah.
And now how many do you have?
So I have 12 businesses.
Yeah. So we had a conversation. We had a couple conversations about just what the next 20 years are going to look like.
Yeah.
And I knew almost the second we moved here. And so this was probably 3 months after we moved here that we had this conversation.
Yeah, that's funny.
I knew I was supposed to be doing something else, but I just didn't know what.
Yeah.
And that's how that started. So
yeah, that is funny. I remember very clearly our conversation when you came out to my office in East Valley. And I could tell that you were so hungry for something else.
Yeah.
But just like a lot of people, they have the world they've built. They build a world of opportunity, but for a lot of people, at some point, it feels like they've built their own prison in some element, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like safe. Like there was a lot of safety for you because you were good at what you did before.
It's funny you say that too, because what a lot of people would talk about, they would say, I had the golden handcuffs on.
Yeah.
Meaning that they could not go out into the marketplace and find what they have here, which was really untrue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Far from true.
Yeah. I remember that conversation actually pretty clearly where I'm just like, he's going to do something. He's got to take the leap.
Yeah.
He's got to take
then,
the jump.
So then he suggested that I get my eventually after multiple conversations, once you get your real estate license and join my team, I'll take care of the marketing. And I'm like, so, I mean, how much would you think, how much would I expect to make? And you said, well, what do you think would make this worth it?
Yeah.
Because I had to go get my license. I had 3 kids and working full time. And I said, and I had no idea. I'm like, is 50,000 doable? And you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, now, later on, I'm like, man, that ceiling was low.
Yeah.
But it was cool. That's how it started.
But to Marcus's point, like that's all you knew.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
50,000 at the time was like, sweet.
Yeah.
Extra year.
Yeah.
But that's not going to fund the life I really want.
That's right. Yeah.
So
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. So keep going.
Let's see, where did we end off? Oh, so
you moved to Power Ranch,
moved to Arizona.
Ryan, because I'm sure meeting Ryan was like a really monumental moment in your life. Yeah.
Success.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Ryan Hatcher.
That's when I got my first tattoo, Ryan's face on my lower back.
The small your back.
It's on the timeline for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. So came down to Arizona. That's when I just really started thinking through, and that's when I joined Keller Williams. So I'd been in real estate for a long time. Heard about Keller Williams. And started leaning
Just
in.
Independently, you were in real estate?
Yeah. Okay. So I was with a couple other big brands before.
Okay.
So I started with a small independent brand in Park City. We moved to Prudential. I was with Prudential for a while. When I was doing my own land development, I was with just a small no-name brokerage because I wasn't representing anyone else. Then when I moved to Arizona, I was going to launch my own brokerage. And then got introduced to KW and then really fell in love with the idea of I could basically own my own brand and be my own brand without taking the risk of owning a brokerage, which is kind of funny because now I own brokerages.
Yes,
I joined KW to not own brokerages, and now I own multiple brokerages. But so that's when I really started thinking. That's when, in my mind, real estate as an opportunity started taking an evolution of this idea of instead of just representing buyers and sellers, how do you start building all of the businesses around it? If you can, there's multiple, every transaction we ever do, there's multiple points of sell. It's not just the transaction, but if you think about it, is somebody gets paid, an agent gets paid, a title company gets paid, a mortgage company gets paid, a property casualty insurance gets paid, all the way down to someone's buying candles at Bed Bath & Beyond.
And contractors, everything.
Everything. So then you start thinking through okay, where, if I own the relationship and I lead out with value, how do I bring the same level of experience and customer service to every point of the sale along the way, so to make sure the consumer's taken care of all the way through? So that was an eye-opening moment for me to kind of put me on this journey of saying, okay, well, it's not just me being a great real estate agent. How do I own the property management company, the mortgage company, the title company, and all of those things? So.
That's awesome. So from there to the 12 businesses that you own today, what are those 12?
I need my org chart in front of me. So let me see if I can.
It's extensive.
So Green Management Group, the property management company, Green Group, our real estate sales team, Green Holdings, which is my real estate development. And then there's a branch of that also that operates as a separate P&L that does like hard money lending and those type of things. Then I have my Keller Williams franchises, which we had 4 of them, but I've merged them into 2 separate.
So one's in St. George.
What's that?
One of them St. George?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's cool.
KW St. George. So basically, KW St. George territory is all like the bottom half of Utah. Okay. And then I own from like Salt Lake North, that territory. And between those 2 brands, we've got 8 offices in those different, with those 2 different brands.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's just super random side note, but that's super interesting, especially as I think of some of the stuff that's happening here in the East Valley.
Yeah, we actually we started shifting through the thought process, and there were some interesting conversations of saying like, well, so for example, I own 2 brokerages that were 15 miles apart from each other,
right? And
I was carrying a full staff for both of them, and it just didn't make sense. So I was like, how do I push these under one brand and then offer an elevated level of service to our agents with a different structure of a brand? Yeah. So we started thinking through that and then shifted to what we call like a branch partnership model, where similar to what you have in an independent office, but how do we create that without them taking on the risk of an actual brokerage? So
well, and especially with like so many people working remotely and not necessarily being in office, right? You can create that culture, foster it on a bigger level.
That's right.
You don't necessarily have to be super hyper local.
Yep, I love that. And then from there, we shifted and launched our title company, mortgage company. I own a virtual assistant company called Exec Assist. What am I missing?
What's your favorite?
My favorite.
Is that a bad question to ask?
Maybe I'll answer it differently.
The one that makes the most money?
I think the one I'm probably most excited about long term. So I think about it this way: is a lot of the businesses I'm building. So I'm at an evolution in my career right now where I know over the next few years, I want to shift how I'm spending some of my time. So like a lot of the filter I run a lot of my decisions through right now is for any new opportunity, I want to shift to where I'm focused on anything that has low overhead, so that when I want to push, I can push, and when I don't want to push, I don't have to push. Low people drama. So, because a big chunk of every day for me is if even there's 1% of people in my world that are having some element of an issue, that's several issues I got to deal with a day. So low overhead, low people drama. And the third one for me, because I love to travel and be on the move, is can I do it from anywhere in the world? Yeah. So if you look at my whole organizational chart, I look at the ones that fit that criteria of low overhead, low people drama, and can I do it anywhere in the world? The ones that I think I'll do forever, I'll never retire, is I love my podcast brand, The Whole Enchilada, of just like really developing people living a balanced life across all aspects of their world. My personal development investment company, Green Holdings, I'll always push and grow that piece of it. And then I own and run a real estate fund called the Falcon Fund, which to me, the thing I love about that, even though I'm already doing my own investing, is that it creates a pathway for other people to get involved in the real estate investing world, where a lot of people are timid to step into that world. So I love introducing people to that passive income world.
They're timid because they have limited knowledge, skill, and maybe limited funds, right?
That's right. Yeah. And most REITs, like big real estate funds, like most of them don't want to deal with the majority of people. So they generally have like a minimum buy-in of like 150,000, 200,000. So a good friend of mine who also owns several KW offices, Johnny Christensen, I don't know if you guys know Johnny, and he runs the Red Sign team out of Utah. He and I got together and said, how do we create a fund that opens it up for more people to get involved in? That's why we launched the Falcon Fund. That has like a much lower buy-in for people to get involved. So it just, even though there's a little more drama that comes with it with some people, it creates a way for what my goal with it is let people taste passive income in hopes that it will make them want more.
Yeah.
And then they can go do their own investments on their own.
Yeah. I love that.
Very cool. Well, one thing I want to ask. So in that first conversation, or one of the first conversations we had, you taught me about a 7-level business.
Yep.
Which for those that don't know, it's essentially a business that runs without your physical presence, right?
Yep.
Okay. And you were walking me through this exercise of outlining what the 20 years from now is going to look like in minute detail. And I asked you, I said, so what does yours look like? And you said, well, at the time you wanted seven level businesses that were producing a certain dollar figure every year. So basically passive income. Yep. And you made a comment, I'm ahead of schedule. So then I realized, okay, this is not a normal dude. Like most,
I am far from normal.
Most
good or bad.
Yeah. I mean, you think about the general population, that's less than the top 5% probably that do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe less. Like what is that? What makes you so different?
Yeah, that's a good
like what's
question.
what's your motivation? Why are you so different in that regard?
Well, that's a tough question. Does he always ask these tough questions?
No.
I don't know.
I'm
curious though, because
I'll say part of it goes back to like my childhood. There's kind of two pieces to my childhood that I think play a big piece of this. One is there's my parents are some of the most solid, good people you'll ever meet, but there's also some of the kookiest people you'll ever meet. But the one thing that I told my dad even the other day, I'm like, Dad, you already gave me my inheritance. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I was like, it was my work ethic. Because as in my family, particularly for the boys at a very young age, like summer hit and it was, you go to work, like you pay for your own school clothes, things like that. So even at 8 years old, is my summers were me working. So like to me, my biggest asset is I never will claim to be the smartest person in the room, but I know I can outwork anybody else. Yeah. And then there was an era as a kid that and this surprises a lot of people when I tell them because I come across as a very confident person, but there was an era as a kid where I really had no personal self-confidence and just had a hard time finding self-worth. And I think the word bullying gets overused, but I just didn't get treated very good by some people in my world that made me feel like unworthy, like that I wasn't going to amount to anything. Some of them even like I had teachers tell my parents that I wasn't succeeding in school, those type of things. And even to the point that the last couple of years, my mom told me something that she meant as a compliment, but I was like, oh, wow. She told me like, oh, Marcus, of all of my kids, you were the one that I like would stay awake at night and like just be like, what is he gonna do with his life?
How funny.
So I think part of like my drive was almost like at least at the beginning was like, I'm gonna prove to people I can do this. But there was a shift in my career after I had some element of success that I went from I'm doing this to prove it to somebody then I took a shift to like, how many people can I impact? Like how do I help people become better? And that was like a shift in my career where I went from I'm doing this to prove something to I'm doing this to impact, which is, I don't know if that helps.
Is that why you went into the OP role and all of that? Or is that, how does that show up, Marcus?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me because within my organizations, for you to not be involved on a day-to-day basis, you have to hire leaders. You have to hire really talented people, right? Not just doers. And I think one of the biggest misnomers in business, particularly from someone that's really good at what they do, is the skill set it took for me to be a really good real estate agent was significantly different than the skill set that I needed to be a great leader.
For sure.
And I'm hesitant to say that because I still feel like I'm on a leadership journey. In fact, when I met with my team at the end of this year, and I was blatant with them. I said, guys, the thing I'm most focused on right now is I'm proud of my leadership skills for what the market was, but I've got to prove that I'm the leader for the market that's coming, which means I need to double down on my leadership skills. And by verbalizing that to my team, I knew that I had to grow. So
how do you do that?
How do you do that?
Yeah,
that's a good question. I think a great leader, there's kind of, in my mind, there's kind of two sides to leadership. There's the charisma, energy, like making people feel good about what we're doing. And I think most leaders lean on that, but that is of no power without the accountability on the other side of it, right? A great leader has to be able to say, this is where we're going and why I believe what we're doing. I believe we're the team to do it.
And set the vision.
But then also come back around and say, Ryan, you told me that you were committed to what we were doing. And for us to get there, you are going to do A, B, C. And then you're not doing these things, that are these things no longer important to you? Like, are we ready to make a move forward, or are we getting out of business together? And I think that some leaders are either really accountable and rub people the wrong way and have a hard time getting instigation of people moving forward, or they're just really charismatic and people love to be around them, but there's no accountability. And I think both of those scenarios just cause us a little bit of a stir. And I think the right balance is individual to the person you're leading. But a great leader to me is constantly developing that talent of like, do I believe in where we're going? Am I head of the team? Can I cast the vision? Are people going to win in my world? And have I been clear enough exactly what my expectations are for them of the lead measures that they need to do? And do they know that the team can't win if they don't pull their weight and do their part? And so it's like, to me, those are like the two sides of it, which sounds really easy to say in a 30-second sentence, but in reality, like that's
For
that's a
sure.
constant ongoing battle of leadership.
Well, and I think what you said is so true that so many people think, well, I'm great in real estate, or I'm great in this, I can be a great leader. And those are two totally different skill sets.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it doesn't work simultaneously, right? It takes a lot of intention and effort and all of that. Speaking of, you kind of talked about the market and all of that. What are some of the opportunities you see in our market?
So for me, the biggest thing I'm looking at right now is we talk a lot about a market shift going on, but there's also a very big industry shift going on right now. And I think a lot of people talk about them as they're the same thing, but they're two very different things. A market shift is driven by supply and demand, which has a lot to do with interest rates. There's a lot of buyer pent up demand, all of those things. But markets go up and go down. Industries, if you look over the history of time, industries have very pivotal moments of change. Like if you look historically at the real estate market, like the minute that we went to an online MLS versus the 3-ring binder, right? That was the power of a real estate agent before, is if someone wanted to know what was on the market, they needed the agent. They didn't need that anymore. So we had a very specific industry shift at that time. I think the big industry shift that's going on right now is within the next there's a battle right now to decide who the consumer really wants at the center of every transaction. And we saw this with the tech industry over the last couple of years, literally spending billions of dollars trying to convince the consumer that technology was the most important part of a transaction. And if they chose a technology that had a cool platform and felt good in their hands and operated good on their phone, that technology would say, all right, well, since I own the consumer, I'm going to tell you what agent to use. And I'm going to tell you what lender to use. And I'm going to tell you what title company to use. The problem is to offset the cost of all that technology, their solution was to find an agent that didn't know how to build a business and was going to pay them a $25,000, $30,000 a year salary to sit at home in their boxer shorts and try to do a good job, right? And so the good news is the consumer did react to their plan, but not the way the financial industry anticipated. Is they do want technology to be part of the process. But the good news is this is such an important transaction for most people, either from the home they're going to live in and build memories with their families, to investing in where their grandkids are going to grow up. All of those things. It's such an important transaction that they do want a guide to take them through that process. And this is one of the big delineators with this is there's going to be a bigger disparity of the agents that can succeed in this business, because over the last decade, you could be a poser in this industry and get a license. Like every real estate agent went through the exact same number of hours to get a real estate license because they memorized the same number of terms. But the way they show up to really serve the consumer is significantly different. And the consumer is going to be a lot pickier on who they want to guide them through that process. And once they put the trust in that agent, their expectations of that agent is going to be a lot higher. It's not just an agent to take me from I need to buy or sell a house today to the closing table. It's now thinking through what is my relationship as the consumer with the assets that I own, the home. And so from an agent perspective, I think we need to start thinking through like what is the value we're bringing through the life of the relationship of the home, not just the consumer, if that makes sense.
Right, or just the transaction.
Just the transaction.
Yes.
And so to me, that's the evolution of the industry, which is great for people like you guys that are so focused on really providing solid value to the consumer. It's bad news for the agent that's like staring at their phone, hoping someone's going to call them for a quick transaction.
Right. Yeah. That is, I think, I agree. I think there is a big difference between people in how they serve the client and what the client wants, and then how that client views that agent, right?
Yeah.
I went to show a house, and it was my listing. My client wants me there at all the showings. And the buyers came, and they just had whoever popped up on Zillow, but they already had a realtor. So then they ended up turning around and bought it with their realtor, but that Zillow agent. And I was listening to his conversation while he was there, and he was like trying to ask him all, and I'm thinking, dude, you should have asked him those questions before you got here. Like, why are you just asking those now? Yeah. But that's what so many agents are like. And that's why we get such that bad rap, because it is super transactional instead of what's the life of the relationship and how can I provide more value and serve my client and carry them through forever.
Yep.
And be their one-stop shop, right?
Yep, that's right.
For all that kind of stuff. That's cool.
Yeah. So to me, that's the big evolution of the industry. If we don't get enough agents that are willing to say, I really do want to bring a massive amount of value over time, there is a potential risk of us losing that position, which is a detriment to the consumer long term.
Sure.
But I do believe there's enough good players out there now catching the vision of like, I need to up my game that.
Well, I think you're seeing like that separation, right? Yeah. Whereas if all we are is door openers, well, Open Door puts a keypad on the front door. So why couldn't that be automated?
You've been replaced.
Right? Like, so thinking of those things, but when you provide enough value, people see it.
That's right.
And I think we're being kind of trained to want instant access, quick things quickly and easily.
Yeah.
That's the right way of saying is we just want it easy.
Yep.
And so having the right realtor who really knows what they're doing can help make that process easier for the client.
Yeah. And the consumer in my mind wants to take the interview process seriously to choose their agent. But once they choose their agent, if they put the time and energy into it, they almost want to be like, okay, the big decision's over. They don't want to go then interview a lender and then interview a title company and then interview and not obviously they need options in those scenarios, but they want to put a lot more confidence in their agent at that point to be like,
it can direct them.
Guide me through this whole process. Yeah. Like I put the energy into choosing you. Yes. Well, now do the value.
It's funny you say that. Just 2 hours ago, we take a listing and they had interviewed, listing. So the sellers had already interviewed a couple agents already. And they were going to wait and think about it. And then we didn't even get up and they said, okay, no, we're going to make the decision right now. And they went with us. And you could just see the relief that they were just, they were done now making that big decision.
Yep.
And we're looking forward to just letting us walk them through it. So,
well, and one of the things that they said to piggyback on that was that you guys touched on a lot of things that are going to make this easier for us that we were not wanting to deal with.
Yep.
And we already had solutions to that. So
yep.
I want to switch gears a little bit, Marcus, and because one of the things I think that's cool about you is you are a giver and you are a teacher. And I know that you do a lot with your kids to intentionally teach them. Can you share some of those things?
Yes. I always precurse this with I am in no way a perfect parent. Like I'm way more blessed to be their dad than they are to be my kids because I think God sent them to me because they teach me so much. I do feel I feel an obligation with my own kids, and also this is why even this morning I was teaching a wealth building class up at an office here in Arizona. Is I feel like it's our obligation to teach this next generation to think differently. I think just unfortunately the way our world operates is too many kids have had it too easy and too much access just to nice things. Yeah. And frankly, the way most parents are spending money are teaching kids that the value of money is how quick can it pass through your hands, which to me is could potentially be the downfall of our nation. Sure. And I love this country. I think it's wonderful. I'd love to see it get back in the right direction. But when you look at a country that our debt is so high, then we look at consumer debt for American citizens is the highest it's ever been. Yes. Savings is as lowest it's ever been. Yeah. I look at it and be like, well, who's giving them the example of this? Right. It's how we're operating our country and telling people that's how they should operate their personal lives. So for me, a big piece of this is how do we get people to think differently around money? And not just think about living inside this box, which society tries to teach us of like, there's this very clear path of you go to school, you get a job, you contribute to your retirement plan. Then at some point you retire and the government takes care of you. Like that plan does not work long-term. And so even though I would love to have an impact on a bigger scale, like my number one responsibility is make sure my kids 100%. Are understood. And if we had more parents that were just focused on helping their kids think differently, that would be what instigates change.
I heard that recently where they were talking about like start with your dining room table, dinner table. Couldn't get that out, but start there, right? Like those are the people that you can have and change their lives. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great point because right now, so many people are excited about posting a picture on social media of them building a house in Mexico, which is great. I don't want to take away from that. But when was the last time you sat down with your kids at home and said, let's talk about how the world really operates, right? And so I don't want to discount from those bigger things. I think those are great experiences, but it is more impactful if you start at the dinner table and say, how can I change this thought process? And so like, even when I teach these wealth building classes, I always invite them, if anything resonated with you and helped you think about money differently today, I encourage you to go out and find two or three other people that you can share this with. Because if we have 60, 70 people in a room and they all go have that conversation with someone else that same day, now we've impacted 150 people, 200 people to think differently. Yeah. But somewhere a movement's got to change. So, I mean, some of the silly things I do with my kids is like I do hard money lending. And sometimes what I'll do with my hard money loans is anytime I'm doing it, I'll go to my kids and just say, hey, I'm doing another loan. Who wants in? Yeah. So they can see the power of money, right? Obviously, I'm not writing them into the actual contract, but I have an agreement with them, right? Yeah.
Where do they get their money in the first place?
So my older kids have jobs.
With your businesses or elsewhere, like babysitting?
Both. So I pay them to do certain things for my business. And then like I have a daughter that works at Barnes & Noble. They do a lot of babysitting. And part of that is like I'm very clear with them of the things that I cover for them and the things they need to pay for themselves. Yeah.
This is one of my favorite things actually, is to talk to different parents about how they teach money. Like I knew this couple that they had their kids do chores for pay, and then they paid rent in the house. And we're talking pennies and dimes, right? But it was teaching them from age 5 how to handle. Like you don't get to keep everything you make, you know. Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I think it is a challenge. Like still, like Kershell and I talk regularly. We live in a very nice neighborhood, and my kids sometimes compare our life to some of their friends, and not that we could easily provide a lot of those things, but I'm purposely choosing not to, because some of the things that made me driven to do the things I want to do is because I had, if I wanted to take a girl on a date on a weekend in high school, I had to go figure out how I'm going to pay for it, right? Instead of just being like, Mom and Dad, I need money, right? Or I had to like negotiate with my brother of like, hey, which one of us gets to use the 20-year-old van this weekend, right? I love it. So there's things like that I'm just like, I'm trying to find the right balance of I want my kids to have a better upbringing than I did, and doing a lot of fun things. And I love to travel, but also help them understand like these are luxuries. This is not the norm. For sure. So it is a challenge that way. But like the first time they came in on one of those hard money loans, you could just see like the trepidation of like, Dad, like, am I going to see this money back? I'm like, maybe. Yeah. I didn't overly paint the picture. Like I was like, most of the time I get paid back. Sometimes I don't. Right. And no pressure. You don't have to do it if you want. And then the other thing that I think is fun is I've taken my kids, it drives my banker nuts. But I get my kids, I take them to the bank and I sit down with our banker. I'm like, tell them all about the banking process. Like, what do you do? How does that work? And then I take them out after and say, let me tell you why none of that's right. Yeah. Because I want them to like see how a banker thinks about money versus, and then just helping them understand, like if you would have taken that same $200 that we got 2 points and 12% on, what would have you made on that if it was sitting in the bank? Yeah. And when they look at, they would have made like 3 cents. Right. And they're like, wait, I would have made 3 cents with that money sitting in the bank versus what we made. I'm like, yeah, but this is how the majority of the world works. Totally. So they think about that. So it's just like little things like that I think are fun for them to start thinking through.
You have to tell this story, Marcus. And I know we can't go forever, but you have to tell the story of your daughter using your credit card to buy stuff.
Oh, yeah, this is funny because it's just and I think this is a real problem for people is because Amazon has made it so
it doesn't hurt to go easy. Like this.
No, well, not even that anymore. It's just like a click of the mouse, right?
Well, and if they know your login, like my kids do, then there's so
and Amazon's so good at like, well, if you wanted that, you also want this, right? And you're like, yes, I do, right? And somehow she didn't quite make the connection of when she was clicking on things that somebody was paying for it. And so I went to my wife and I was like, what are we buying? Right. And she's like, I don't know what these are. So we go in and look at the Amazon account and see all these things. And so we went and talked to our daughter. She's like, oh. And like still I questioned, like, you had to have known someone was paying for this.
Had they arrived yet and she opened a box?
Oh yeah. This is all stuff she had, and it was she looks good.
That's awesome.
And so that's awesome. So I was like, how are you gonna pay it back? And so she had to go work at my dad has this little ranch. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't like the easiest work to do. So I talked to him like, she's got to work. Yeah. Like, this isn't like Papa being nice. Yeah. I'm trying to remember how old she was. I think she was probably 13 or 14 at the time.
That's awesome.
But it was a learning
How much
experience.
did she rack up?
I think it was like $460 or something. It wasn't like anything ridiculous, but enough that for a 14-year-old kid to be like, you got to go earn $460 back with interest, right? I charged her interest.
So
I love it so much.
Yeah, but it was funny.
But those are like the hard lessons that they learn that fortunately they can learn them safely with us, right? So it's like so many parents don't allow their kids to have to learn that. And I think that's what creates those bad habits. So
that's right.
I love that.
Yeah. So right or wrong, there's just little things like that. I'm trying to get them to think about money. One of the things I've talked about is when I teach my wealth building class, I talk a lot about money rules, right? Yeah. So like creating for every $1 that comes into your world is pre-deciding how you're going to split that dollar up. And one of the things that we think about providing education for our kids a little bit differently, instead of just like being like, we're going to pay for all your education. Several years ago, even when Abby was our only kid, Shell and I decided what amount of money we wanted to have available for our kids to start their lives. And so for 18 years, we made a automatic weekly deposit to all of our kids' accounts. Hopefully my other kids aren't going to listen to this because they don't know that account exists yet. But when Abby graduated high school this last year, I took her on a trip to Europe, and we spent a really fun time together. And that's when I told her that I had been making this deposit for her every week for 18 years. And it was just fun to watch her see like, oh, this wasn't just like a last minute, how are we going to do this? But it was like really expressing to her of like, this was a sacrifice for us weekly for 18 years that we put this amount together. And then the way we present it to her is like, this is your life is yours to live. Like what you want to build is yours. So we're going to decide together how you want to spend this money. But when it's gone, it's gone. Yeah. So it's been fun to watch her think through, now that this is there, of thinking through like, well, what is it that I want? Yeah. And if I use it, it's gone. Right. So she's talking to me about like, how do we invest that money and things like that? I mean, she's now going to go on a mission. So she's talking to me about like, what should we do with that money while I'm gone? So it's working for me.
What we talked about, like go buy a house. Yeah. And then rent it out and let that pay for her mission. Yeah. And when she gets back, she has an asset.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I love it. It's brilliant. But there's just little things like that that have been fun. And again, right or wrong, it's not necessarily it's been good. It's been a good process for us. Yeah. But regardless, what I would say to most people is just talk more about it. For some reason, we live in a world where no one wants to talk about religion, politics, or money. I can understand not wanting to talk about politics because that's tough. I think we could all talk a little bit more about maybe not religion, but spirituality. Yeah. And then we should be more open about talking about money.
For sure.
Marcus, what should we ask you that we didn't already ask you?
Well, I would say probably... It's always hard for me because I don't want to overly paint a rosy picture. You guys are so kind to me to have me on, and the compliments you gave me were so kind. I would say that probably the thing we didn't touch on is like, what do I struggle with? Like, what are challenges? Because I think that that is what instigates change. Is all of us have challenges going on at any given moment in our world. Like sometimes when I'm just walking through a grocery store, you look at people and every single person you pass has some element of a challenge going on. Some of them great, some of them small, and some of them really in the grand scheme of things are small, but in the moment feel massive to that person. And I'm no different. Like I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the things that I've done. I'm proud of what I've done. And, I'm also know that I've got a ton to learn and a ton to grow. And I love rubbing shoulders with people like you guys to become a better version of me.
So what are your struggles?
Yeah. What keeps you up at night?
So right now, I'd say my biggest struggle right now is asking myself, am I the right leader that my people need me to be for this evolution of change, right? And I just think all of us have been on this run up of the skills we had served us well through that run up. And that's my biggest concern right now is like, am I the right solution for tomorrow? And I think any leader should be asking that. I think if any leader thinks they're already there, they're probably done. Right. And I'm committed to my people. So I either have to grow that skill set to do it or hire the right skill set to fill in behind me to do it. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest challenges I have. The other, I'm at an interesting point in my career too, where like at some point I'm inherently a grower and builder, and I love to grow and build things. But at some point, it doesn't make sense to keep building, and at some point I got to step aside and create an opportunity for other people to be the builders and growers, and me to be more of a mentor. And I'm trying to figure out like when is the right time for that to happen in my world. So those are like the kind of things I'm trying to figure out for myself.
So good. I feel like we could keep going, but I know we got to keep our time down. But we always like to end with a little speed round. So are you up for our speed round?
Let's do it.
First thing that comes to mind, favorite food?
Mexican food.
Yes. Favorite drink?
Water.
Okay.
I love water. I'm drinking a lot of flavored water right now because I'm trying to get off energy drinks.
For sure. Hey, smart. Favorite sound?
Ooh, favorite sound? I love music. So like guitar music for me is I'm a guitar player, so I love listening to guitar music.
Okay. Favorite book?
Favorite book, Motivation Manifesto.
Okay.
Best book of all time.
Is it? Okay. Favorite podcast? I won't limit you, so go ahead.
I mean, the whole enchilada.
The whole enchilada. I'll say the whole enchilada, not from an egotistical play, but the whole point of the enchilada is I'm on a journey of self-development, and that's the whole premise behind it. Is I love what I've learned.
Yeah. Can I just say that? I know I always tell these guys, I feel like the podcast is like the most selfish thing I do because I love it so much.
Yeah. Right? I run a journal that's just what I learned when I'm interviewing people.
I love that.
And it is so fun because I'm getting so many ahas.
I can't write fast enough.
Yeah.
Well, and the best thing that I do is listen to them back. Like after I literally listen to them, and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember that. You know. So
I just listened to the J. Papasan.
Oh, did you?
Morning. Yeah.
Oh, he's such a stud.
That was good. That was an intriguing conversation.
Oh, good. Yeah, he is an intriguing person.
Yeah.
For sure, I'll have to listen. Okay, last one. Favorite vacation. You're a world traveler.
I am. So. My favorite vacation recently was Bora Bora. My kids would be mad at me about it because we didn't take the kids on that one. But I was just so able to unplug on that trip. And Shell and I just had the best time spending time with each other there. So
that's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Marcus Green, thank you for being with us and for sharing and just,
Yes. And check out the whole enchilada podcast.
Yeah, come find us. Thank you guys for having me. I look up to you guys a lot, so thanks for having me.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks for listening to The Real Deal, where real estate meets real life. Make sure to follow or subscribe to the Home Selling Team on YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify to stay up to date with our podcast.